All right, so we're going to talk a bit in this session about land acquisition and kind of the role and the steps and process that you have to go through to acquire land. And there's a lot more to it than you might think. It is typically one of the smaller departments with within a home building operation. I've seen it as small as just one person. Sometimes it's two or three, four maybe at the most. But like I said, it's a very critical aspect and function because obviously you need land if you're going to have a project. So one of the main roles of the land acquisition person is to source and find land opportunities. And typically there is a lot of opportunities that will come across the desk in land acquisition. And part of the role of the land acquisition person, the manager, is to screen and sort out and prioritize these opportunities. And I would say in most cases, the land acquisition, is manager or director, it's a fairly experienced senior person. They generally have a lot of experience and background and really necessary to do a lot of this work. So, you've got all these deals coming across your desk. The land acquisition manager's role is to screen them, prioritize them, focus on what the division wants to do as far as strategy. And it's a big part of a daily routine. And also, they're getting this project information in packages, and a lot of it's digital now, but there's usually key information in there so that you can do enough preliminary underwriting or preliminary analysis, enough to put an offer together. In a lot of cases, it's a bit about looking through that and finding what else maybe you need, either from the seller or possibly doing a little bit of market research or cost research to essentially have enough information to put together a viable offer. So then that comes the next part or step in the process is actually making offers. Now these are typically done in the form, it's called a letter of intent or LOI. And this letter of intent is generally 2 or 3 pages. And I like to think of it as the essential terms and conditions that the seller and buyer are going to agree to. So the buyer, land acquisition person, is going to submit LOIs or the offer to the seller and see if there's a meeting of the minds. And this LOI is typically not binding. It's, again, just that everybody's on the same page with the essential business terms and conditions, because then we go to the next part, which is actually a binding purchase and sale agreement. And that is the part where it can get really contentious and tough, because now you're really getting into the negotiation with the seller as a land acquisition or land buyer. And you usually have attorneys on both sides, and there's usually some more business terms that maybe weren't in that LOI that sort of get flushed out in trying to do this purchase and sale agreement. And then there's a lot of legal language that essentially the attorneys will kind of battle over and how they would like to see something written. So it can be a pretty tough process, and I've seen many deals where land deals fall apart because they can never get to a signed purchase agreement. And I would say the quickest I've seen of getting a purchase and sale agreement done is maybe 1 week, and it can take 3-4 weeks because there's a lot of negotiation going back and forth and reviewing red line documents from one party, and then they have comments back and can get contentious. And so anyway, very big part of the land acquisition role is the purchase and sale agreement. So then, let's just assume that you've gotten to this binding purchase and sale agreement, so it's a real contract. Another big part of land acquisition is the feasibility or due diligence period. And almost in all land acquisition, there is an agreed upon term, usually 30, 60 days, maybe longer if it's more complex project, but for a home builder, I would say 45 to 60 days for the land buyer, the home builder, to do all its due diligence and really vet out the project. And now we're getting into really detailed analysis. We talked about the preliminary underwriting or preliminary analysis before you make an offer. Well, now you basically want to really thoroughly vet out that project, because as I'd mentioned in the first segment, you can only buy the land once. And once you've bought it, I mean, it could kill your project profitability. So very key part is to get into market analysis, cost analysis, really intensive financial analysis with cash flows. And essentially you're trying to vet out every part of the project, whether the site needs to be graded, your construction costs, your marketing, the sales prices and sales rates, all that gets done. And it's quite a rush in 45 to 60 days. And I will say that, a lot of cases you have outside studies being done. Maybe it's a market study, maybe it's a cost study, maybe there's some other things going on that you need to have an outside consultant work on. So they're all busy too. So 45 to 60 days goes pretty quickly. So then the last thing is really just getting to the point where you're closing escrow. So let's just assume that you have gone through your feasibility and due diligence. And typically the land acquisition professional, they're going to meet with the other VPs or department heads. They're also going to meet with the division president or company owner to basically go through all their findings, because essentially somebody has to approve the acquisition of the project. And let's just say you're a private company, that would generally be the company owner who is going to look at all this analysis or due diligence that you did and decide whether they want to move forward and close on the project. Now, the more bigger builders and public builders, they essentially have a land committee, and even the bigger public builders, they meet once a week. And so what you'll end up doing is submitting a package that's got all your findings, has a summary, and you're basically sending it there looking for recommending it to be approved. And if you couldn't recommend it, then you probably aren't going to send it there. So that's a really big step in the process to actually getting through a transaction, is making sure you have all of your due diligence and feasibility findings organized and presented to the decision makers. And then there's the process of finalizing it, which is closing escrow, which basically you deal a lot with the escrow officer, who's the quarterback, who will coordinate between seller and buyer. There's a lot of paperwork that goes on, and sometimes there's little glitches that go on that maybe delay the closing. So anyway, that's a quick little version of land acquisition. There is a lot to that whole thing, and we offer actually a course on that and then some. So anyway, hopefully that gives you a quick overview of what goes on in the land acquisition role.